Hi, everyone. We're going to continue our introduction to colonial history of India and how that impacts and shapes current government policy, legal policy, and all policies having to do with the management of religion and the economy in India. And so, again, the biggest democracy in the world, it also has probably unparalleled struggles and strife over subgroups within India based on religion, based on caste. And later this week, we'll focus on another huge issue, and that's the role of women in India. And just last class, we essentially ended at the partition of India, a disastrous event triggered by malign incompetence and a disastrous departure by the British to end their colonial empire and their role in India. And it's both horrific and tragic, and yet fitting that the departure of the British resulted in one of the biggest genocides in a short period of time in history, as Hindus rushed out of regions of the new Pakistan and back into India, and Muslims were trying to rush out of the new India and into places like Pakistan, East Pakistan that became Bangladesh. It was just a mess, and the source of it is religious tribalism, and religious tribalism and its role in India is a consequence of the way the British enumerated the citizenry, the population of India, so they could track them and tax them and rule them. And they basically weaponized religion. And then very soon thereafter, 1948, Gandhi, the father of India, the icon of peaceful resistance, who pushed and played probably the key role in galvanizing support to push the British out. He himself is killed, not by a Muslim. Gandhi was Hindu, but by a Hindu radical who thought he was not Hindu enough and he was being too peaceful with Muslims. You can see in this horrible event the fact that religious strife is going to mark this country for a long time. Jawaharlal Nehru takes over as prime minister, and he rules for 17 years until 1964. He leads the Congress Party, which was the group that played a key role, one of the top groups in pushing the British out. And he is the first native political leader of India. And then very soon after he has a stroke, that's his wife in 1918 with his one daughter, Indira. This is Indira with her two sons, Rajiv and Sanjay. Indira, you can see this family dynasty. Indira takes over the Congress Party. And you can read about her in biographies and documentaries. An incredibly fascinating ruler, because extremely authoritarian, and for a period in the 1970s suspends all of the civil rights and liberties and freedom of the press, and basically shuts down democracy for a few years because she feels like she and India are being attacked, and the Congress Party is not managing it. But she rules for many, many years. And then again, the 70s has this really, really turbulent time where she becomes as much an authoritarian as the British ever were. And then she's assassinated in 1984. Again, now it's not by Muslims, but it's by Sikhs. And you can read the history of why the Sikhs were so angry at her, but it was partly because she ordered troops to storm one of their sacred worship sites. Again, this goes back to this theme of, you can see why China and Vietnam and other places are like, no religion. Religion is just a hindrance. It just causes strife and conflict and distracts people from focusing on big national goals. And so she's assassinated. Her son takes over, Rajiv Gandhi takes over, and he leads the Congress Party for several years. And then actually the Congress Party gets voted out. He's basically trying to regain power in the early 1990s. He's assassinated in 1991. Just as an interesting note, I was in London at a Paul Simon concert the 21st of May, 1991. How do you remember these things? It's just that's where I was when they turned on the lights in the middle of the concert and made this announcement that that he had been assassinated. Yeah, I mean, just such a history of violence and assassinations. His widow, who's Italian-born, so she can't officially be the prime minister, but she works with Dr. Singh, and the Congress Party wins in 2004 and 2009. And the Congress Party, for most of the years up until 2014, from 1947, 48 up until 2014, they rule most of the time. They are the most dominant party. And in the end, as you'll see, their rule leads to such extraordinary corruption that corruption opens the door for the BJP party, a Hindu nationalist party, and with Narendra Modi to run on an anti-corruption pledge that morphs over time into a Hindu nationalist movement. And this goes back to this thing that we started with in class last time, which is it is remarkable that India, as a democracy in the form that it has been in for the last 70 years, doesn't come off the rails and just disintegrate, because there's just so many subgroups vying for control or fearful that they're going to be crushed. And you have one religion that's 80% of the country, and that's the one thing around which it's the single largest group of anything in India. And it's become the thing that Narendra Modi and his BJP party have decided, chosen, strategically believe in, will be the way that they're going to rule in more and more in this country. So that's religion. On top of that, there's a 1,000-year-old tradition called, you probably have heard this, it's called caste. And it's hard. I can't even do justice in explaining this, the nuance, complexity, and subtlety of caste. But I can tell you the British used it along with religion to categorize people. And in so doing, they took something that should have faded out of existence a long time ago, and they reinforced it and reified it, codified it. And there are four main classes, right? The priestly people, the rulers, administrators, warriors, the merchants, and the laboring classes. And then there's actually a fifth group that is not even a class. It's just fifth category of untouchables. They're often called Dalits. And they occupy the lowest rung. And this permeates and is a powerful factor in Indian culture, more so in the rural areas than the urban areas. But that doesn't mean it's not in the urban areas too. And now for an outsider, a Westerner, you probably aren't, I'm not going to pick up on the nuances. I'm not going to be able to pick up on how this plays in daily society. But people who are born in India very much can understand this. You guys can read this. This is an author, Sunil Kilnani, who says caste as a lived Indian reality is crueler than any study of scriptural text would indicate. It's also more fluid. These categories ebb and flow and change based on new jobs and new categories of jobs. But it's a hierarchy. It's absolutely a hierarchy. So you have religious tribalism, and you have where are you in this hierarchy, higher or lower, of the social pecking order in India. And it's you don't see this in a place like China, and it's unbalanced. Of course, it's a negative. It holds back the people on the lower rungs of this caste hierarchy are not able to reach their human development potential as much because there are hindrances and blockages, and prejudice, and there are just closures to them. If you guys want to see a great documentary, which I stumbled on, it's called Daughters of Destiny. I'm going to show you the trailer. And it's an attempt to try to use education and to uplift women to neutralize caste.
I believe now that from the beginning I was destined to Shanti Bhavan is a school for the poorest of the poor. We take children at the age of 4 and they are with us for the rest of their young adult days.
Mission of Shanti Bhavan is to get these children out of poverty. It is to break the fate that their parents have been trapped in.
We are here to bring up your children to love them and encourage them.
Only one child is taken per family. I have to use that opportunity in order to change the life I left behind.
My mom sent me to Shanti Bhavan because she was the only person who loved me.
When I was small, we lived in a thatched roofed house. Everything is in this room.
In addition to uplifting my family, I have the responsibility of giving back to society. I've got a lot to lose. It's now or never for me.
Suddenly one day I woke up and I said, my God, the money is gone.
There was only two options: lie down and die, or just go forward. Closing the school would mean sending all the children back to where they came from. I know I couldn't live without my father too.
I am the answer, but my mother saying, I am who I am because of her. I will show the world I am that girl who makes doorways of freedom, hope, and relief. Not only for my mother, but for all those out there who are in need.
Again, I highly recommend maybe this summer when you have some free time, you want to get sucked into a 4-episode series on that just opens this up, that gives you a window onto caste and gender in India and the extra burdens. We'll cover this more later this week, but oh my gosh, the extra challenges that girls and women face in India, especially in rural areas, but throughout India. So just to give you the overall facts, Hindus are about 80% of the country, the overwhelming majority. Islam, Muslims are about 14%. That's just it's just very small numbers of people thereafter. Sikhs are a subgroup, and they are a religious group in India. They're very small relative to Muslims and Hindus, but that makes their existence that much more precarious. You think the Muslims feel terrified of their place and their safety, Sikhs even more so. And it's even though Muslims are only 14% of India, there are approximately 172 million people. So it makes India the third or fourth largest Muslim country in the world. And so their numbers are huge, but their proportion of the population is small. And so since 2014-15, their anxiety levels have skyrocketed because the BJP party has stated on the record and in announcements and in their founding documents that they see India as a Hindu country. And that's the group that has the most power now, and that's the BJP. And that's Narendra Modi. That is his origin story. It's the source of his power and appeal. And the BJP party in 2019 in their election won so many seats they didn't have to form a coalition with any other group, which has been the traditional Indian model. And so this has just been one of the most interesting and concerning political developments in India's history, especially in the post-colonial period. This using Hindu nationalism works in the sense that you can get a majority of the population to support you. But what they're supporting often are policies that are threatening to non-Hindus. And his model is aspirational, assertive, and anti-elite. You can see a lot of parallels to Trump, and they get along super well. Narendra Modi and Donald Trump, they have a love fest, the two of those guys. And Narendra Modi appoints the largest state, Uttar Pradesh, the largest state, has a Hindu nationalist religious leader. He's a warrior priest, Yogi Adityanath. I may have mispronounced his last name. You'd have to just look him up to. It's sort of beyond belief that such a overtly religious nationalist Hindu leader is the political head of the largest state in India, and he's very hostile to Muslims. And yet, this is the dynamic. This is what has taken over India politically, and it's fueled. He's tapped into that hate. Like Donald Trump tapped into hate, resentment, anger, enemies, scapegoats, villains. Modi has done the same thing, and it's anybody who pushes back journalists who question this model and who tell the truth, they're increasingly attacked and even assassinated. Women journalists. This is one of the famous ones. She was murdered a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, excuse me. And there's no accountability. This is the period where Indira Gandhi suspended all kinds of freedoms and liberties and rights during this emergency period. Thankfully, it didn't last. But you can see now, since Narendra Modi was elected and since the last election, all of these metrics on democracy and freedom have plunged in India. And part of his rise to fame and his sort of rule was he's a good pragmatist who will get the economy growing. He did it in his home state of Gujarat, and he can do it for the whole country. And that has not panned out even before the pandemic. India's rate of growth was declining each year from the high single digits down to 5%, which is not fast enough to create enough new jobs for all the college graduates that are emerging from a growingly educated society. You need 7, 8, 9% economic growth to produce enough jobs for young adults who have gone to college. And if they don't get jobs, that's when resentment and anger grows. So when the economy isn't growing the way that they want it to, a great thing for them in their minds is let's foment religious strife. Let's go after Muslims. Let's go after Pakistan. And let me say, for the record, there have been Muslim terrorist attacks that have originated out of Pakistan and have happened in Mumbai and other parts of India. And so it's not as if there isn't violence on both sides, but the BJP is in control of India and the other ones who have the power. And so Muslims in India are very afraid. And they have a new citizenship law that I'll close with that you can see exactly how this plays into their fears. Let me show you this and we'll close with this.
Center in India's Assam state is set to open in a few months. But India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, says it doesn't even exist. Well, this one is real, and we went to the remote northeast corner of India to see it for ourselves. State officials and workers told us this compound will house up to 3,000 detainees, people who are declared foreigners.
Why are the walls so high?
But here's the thing. Many of the people likely to be held here might not even be foreigners at all. The fear is that most of them will be Muslim. And the state they live in is leading Modi's push to change India overtly Hindu nation. Munawar Khatun is Muslim. She says she was born and raised in India and has the documents to prove it.
Voter I card, birth certificate, marriage certificate.
Still, she was left off a roster of Indian citizens in Assam. Now, she must prove she's legal or risk being sent to detention.
ওরা তো হিন্দু ধর্মের মানুষ আর মুসলমানকে সবসময় টার্গেট করে থাকে যে মুসলমানের শাস্তি কিভাবে দেওয়া যায়।
She's not alone. Almost 2 million people were left off that list. Soon, many will be called to a court like this one, called a foreigners' tribunal. These people have been marked as suspected foreigners. They're bringing their documents to an official. That person, appointed by the government, will then decide if they're Indian citizens or foreigners. Mamoni Rajkumari was one of those officials. She issued decisions in over 600 cases. The majority she found were Indian. And then she sued the government and told us she was fired because she didn't declare enough Muslims as foreigners.
গভৰ্ণমেণ্টে তো ডাইৰেক্ট নকয় নহয় এইটো কথা
but it was implied.
ফৰেনাৰ ট্ৰিবিউনেলবোৰ গঠন কৰিছোঁ আমি ফৰেনাৰ ধৰিব লাগে কিন্তু গোটেই ফৰেনাৰ ট্ৰিবিউনেলত চব মুছলিম মানুহৰে কেছ বেছি
We found 5 more officials, like Rajkumari, who accused the state of targeting Muslims. Only one other would appear on camera. The rest feared reprisal.
This is the assessment report, and my name is serial number 1, Kartik Chandra Roy. Percentage of foreigners declared 1.32, not satisfactory, may be terminated. Why? My performance is not good. Because percentage of declaration is less.
Kartik Roy says he started to face pressure a few years ago when Modi's party, the BJP, took control in Assam.
Yes, that happens after Modi government. That you have to declare, particularly people.
More Muslims as foreigners, he said he too was fired. But how can someone with documents who's lived for years as a citizen suddenly be declared illegal? Take Asbahar Ali.
মোর দেউতাই যেতিয়া নাকি প্রথম ভোট দিলে 85 তাতে নামটো হৈ আছে আজহার আলী আৰু মোৰ দেউতাকৰ নাম আছিল আজবাহাৰ আলী
This spelling error became grounds for questioning his citizenship.
নামের আকার উপরে লেখাতে এসামিস মানুষ লেখাতে অল্প আকারও দিলা ভুল করে আকারও যেজলা ভুল করে এটা তো কোর্টের কাম নয়
He lost his case at the Foreigners Tribunal and ended up going to jail for almost 4 years. During that time, his family sold their land to pay legal fees, and his wife committed suicide.
সংসারটা ধ্বংস করছিল টাকা পয়সা মাটি জমা যেখিনি আছিল গোটেইখিনি ধ্বংস কৰি দিলে
Ali was released on bail, but until he can convince the court that he's Indian, his name will not appear on the citizenship list. So he could end up back in detention. And that list, it's riddled with clerical errors. This man, Das, is also not on the list.
মোর নামর ভোট দিয়ে পজিশন ভোট দিয়ে বাইকিয়া মানে বিদেশ হয়ে গেল
His case is pretty much identical to Ali's, except for one key thing: he's Hindu. And as far as many in Modi's party are concerned, that just means Indian. So, in December, the government doubled down. It passed a new citizenship law favoring all major religions in South Asia, except Islam.
तो जो सारे हिंदू बौद्ध जैन सिख क्रिश्चियन है उनको तो नागरिकता ही मिल जाएगी एनआरसी का कौन सवाल है हम सामने चलकर नागरिकता देनी चाहिए और इसमें कोई दस्तावेज की जरूरत नहीं
In Assam, that means Hindus who are left off the botched list could have their rights restored. But across the country, critics see the new law as the latest example of Modi's anti-Muslim agenda. Protests led to religious riots in India's capital. More than 50 people died in the violence, the majority of them Muslims. But despite months of protesting, Modi has not backed down. In fact, officials in his government have promised to make a countrywide registry of citizens, just like the one in Assam. Modi has denied that that's his plan. Asbahar Ali voted in the past, as only a citizen can, but he may not get to exercise that right again.
ভোট দিয়া পড়িছে কিন্তু দিয়া আমি তো আর ভাবা নাই যে আমি ভোট দিয়ার পিছত যে আমাক ডিটেনশন ক্যাম্পত লৈ যাও বুলি আমি তো এখিনি ভাবা নাই
Okay, see you for the next class.